What do the globalists mean when they say you will own nothing? Well, they mean not even your own bedroom, not even your own house. In a new film, Derek Broze lays out this Agenda 2030. He says it means everything. When they say you own nothing, it really means nothing. Like you go to work, someone else sleeps in your bed while you're there, kind of thing. It is truly 1984 dystopia. But his new film is called Liberation 2030. It is both a warning and a positive manifesto, a call to arms, and how to resist this. I would say it's a peaceful dream, but also a vote of confidence for the human spirit. Watch a short trailer, and then we're going to discuss it with Broze himself.
In 2016, the World Economic Forum and Forbes magazine published a short essay titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." Written by Ida Auken, Denmark's former Minister for the Environment, the essay imagines what life might be like in 2030. The year 2030 was chosen because of its importance to the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. The SDGs are a collection of 17 interlinked objectives adopted by the UN in 2015 with the ostensible goal of ending poverty, protecting the planet, and spreading peace and prosperity to all people by 2030.
Now is a historical moment, a time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
And while millions of people have woken up to this agenda, the vast majority are still spending their time being reactive and allowing these technocrats to manipulate their emotions and actions, and thus their lives. What if, instead of exclusively being reactionary, we put all of our energy into creating our own visions for 2030? If we know we reject the technocratic Great Reset and Agenda 2030, then we must spend time getting to know exactly what we are seeking to create. Instead of, you will own nothing and be happy in 2030, perhaps we can make it, you will be thriving and you will be fulfilled in 2030. The answer completely depends on every single one of us. The future generations are depending on us to build an alternative to the technocratic vision.
Derek, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us why you did this? Because a lot of your journalism, for people who know you, can be kind of scary. But this is a true vision of what we can do and how it might look different.
Yeah, so thank you, Natalie, first for having me on to talk about Liberation 2030. So, yes, a lot of my journalism, and I think all of the content that people like us produce, it can be kind of dark because that's the reality that we're facing right now. There's a lot of heavy things that are on the horizon. And so I feel that the journalistic side is important to bring the information to people, try to wake them up to important issues. And yet at the same time, my heart and my roots are very much in activism and trying to focus on solutions. So I try to balance out those two things. And I think Liberation 2030 is kind of a perfect balance of that, to remind people about the Great Reset and that whole idea that was announced during COVID in summer of 2020, which I don't think has gone away at all. Whether, no matter who's president or what's going on in the world, I think that agenda is still rolling out. And it's, of course, tied to the United Nations Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals. And so I wanted to kind of remind people of what was announced in 2020 and what we're facing, and yet at the same time try to bring it back to, well, what can we actually do for ourselves? What if we didn't just obsess about Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and the like, and what if we put energy into actually creating the lives that we want for ourselves and our families?
Right. I can very much relate to that. Sometimes we get comments of people saying, I used to watch Redacted all the time, but it's like the sky is falling all the time because it's alarmist. And I get that. But every day there's something new that I feel like we need to pay attention to, because if we don't, so we don't do it for clicks. We don't do it, we do it because we're parents and we feel like if we don't watch this, it will happen. And so maybe let's lay out this agenda and how we see it still being implemented.
Sure. So if everybody could throw their minds back to 2020, if you remember March 2020, we first hear this thing called COVID-19. Then we start hearing about lockdowns and masks and mandates and all this sort of stuff. And we knew that vaccines were eventually going to come out. And it was that summer, June 2020, when the World Economic Forum announced the Great Reset. And they put out this short video saying that with Klaus Schwab, now is the time. COVID has presented us with the opportunity to remake capitalism and to remake the world systems. And of course, they really promote it as this utopian thing that, is going to be better for everybody. But many of us are very weary of that for, I think, legitimate reasons. And they said that by January 2021, that next year, they were going to announce the full vision of this Great Reset program. And it is everything that Redacted reports on, that I report about. It's the digital IDs, it's technocracy. Like, this was their vision, but they try to very much spin it again as a utopia. They say driverless cars, robot assistants, UBI, people aren't going to have to work anymore. And some of the things you mentioned were about people living in each other's homes or using each other's spaces. That actually comes from an essay, which was originally published in 2016, but it got a lot of attention during COVID and after the Great Reset announcement. It was written by a Danish politician. I think she was their former environmental minister. And she was outlining this vision. And that is where the phrase, "you will own nothing and be happy," comes from. And she says something to the effect, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better." And then tries to sell us on this vision of that world. And that's why I wanted to kind of step back and let's look at what these people actually claim. Because here we are in late 2025, very quickly approaching 2030. And again, I don't believe these agendas have disappeared, no matter who's in the White House or any other presidential prime minister position. And I think we need to remember that this is the same, whatever they call it, Build Back Better, Great Reset, Agenda 2030, SDGs, it's the same agenda. It's about control over humanity, over resources. And they want to spin it as positively as possible. They like to use all this buzzwords and language that might trick the average listener who's like, "Oh yeah, that does kind of sound nice. Drones are delivering everything to me and I don't have to spend any of my own money. And sure, somebody uses my house when I'm not there." And they try to paint it as great as they can, but I think it's not that hard to look past the buzzwords and see what's really going on, which is the loss of individual liberty and privacy.
Right. And then maybe we can talk about how we see it right now in the fall of 2025 through this. I mean, JD Vance was recently asked about the tracking software used by Palantir, and he's like, "No, I don't actually like that." Now, that's the most direct response we've had from a presidential, official. But what does that mean? Like, what are we going to do about it? He's like, "Yeah, we should resist that." But what? Like, it's still happening. Palantir gets exclusive contracts from the U.S. government.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a number of worrisome things that are happening under Vance and Trump, and that doesn't mean that the Democrats are going to have anything better to offer, that it would have been better under Harris or any of those sort of things. But that's, I think, the bigger point, is that the agenda marches forward under any regime, any administration, even if they sort of advance it down the field in different ways and different perspectives. Just one example, like right before we're recording this, the Associated Press just released a report saying that Border Patrol is tracking Americans' drivers and looking for suspicious behavior. So that's one example of the surveillance state moving forward. And it's being used under the guise of going after illegal immigration. Palantir is a big part of that. And of course, JD Vance, he can say what he likes, but the fact of the matter is that his mentor, Peter Thiel, is the CEO of Palantir. And he, was very much influenced by Peter Thiel, as well as some of Peter Thiel's influences. So I think that we can see that the agenda hasn't gone away. And here in late 2025, I mean, let's think about what we're facing right now. The Real ID has been announced and rolled out in May of this year. It's not a full digital ID yet, but for those who are paying attention, many states are now rolling out what they call mobile driver's licenses or digital driver's licenses. And that's sort of this first step, I think, in this direction. And some of that is use your Google wallet, use your Apple wallet. Others, certain states have created their own digital wallets. There's sort of a combination of different approaches at the moment. But I think with time, perhaps by the end of Trump's term, or maybe with the next president, whoever that may be, that will turn into a full digital ID system. So we can already kind of see some of these systems being put in place. And again, the expansion of surveillance technology, whatever your feelings are about the border or anybody listening's feelings about immigration, the fact of the matter is surveillance is expanding under the guise of fighting illegal immigration, both with facial recognition cameras, with the program I just mentioned, and profiling people on the streets. I think that this is all part of marching us towards this larger police state that the powers that wish they were, what I call the predator class, that they need in order to be able to fully implement the Great Reset, because they're very aware that there is going to be resistance, and there is resistance like there was during COVID. And this is why there's so many different psyops to try to condition the people to accept what they're rolling out, because they know that the masses, or at least those of us who are paying attention, will be resistant. And if they can either subtly coerce us or condition us to accept it or trick us into it by believing it's about one thing when it's really about another, If they can do that, then they can succeed. And those who resist, though, they have ways of dealing with us too. And that's where the police state measures come in.
I mean, let's continue to be a little paranoid for the sake of paranoia, because the government continues to expand its power. And in fact, a government by definition cannot resist. I believe I read this in a book and I can't remember which one, that, I'll find you the title in a second. Every government since the Roman Empire started stamping coins, which gave themselves the power to define and determine currency, which they didn't have before, has not been able to resist the urge to enrich itself, which requires expanded power. I'm going to find you this quote in a second when you're talking in my library. And so that requires the power to track people. And what do you think that they could use this tracking for? Is it such that you can't go to the movies today because, you know, you've already exceeded your carbon credits and we want you to instead do this? You know, I mean, for those of us who know the 1984 eventuality, what can you play that out for us in worst case scenario?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that for one, you point out a very important piece of the puzzle, and that is the printing or the issuing of currency. Obviously, they're not printing it anymore; it's just digital numbers on a screen. But that is a core piece of the pyramid of power, of the ability of governments around the world to be able to control their population. You control the currency, you control the issuance of that currency, and you make it illegal for anybody else to try to compete with that. And now we can also see, of course, how dangerous that will be once it is completely digital. We've already seen this even before we've gotten to the full-on Great Reset digital hellscape, but we saw it during COVID. And I think people should not forget the lessons of COVID 1984, that we saw the ways they will do this. They will use social pressure, they will use bribes, they will use coercion, and they'll say, okay, well, you can't bank here if you don't participate, whether that is what you mentioned, like if you don't have enough carbon credits, or you're not using your digital ID, or you didn't get this injection. The reasons are almost irrelevant, because those are just the ways they're going to get to the end goal, and they will use any ways they can. I think one of the most common ways they use is convenience. They sell the public that this is going to be faster, easier, cheaper for you, especially in the COVID era. We have this increase of stores, for example, where you can go in and just scan your hand, do the Palm Pay thing, or let's say you don't even want to talk to a human because those dirty humans might have some COVID or have some illness. Well, you can just walk into a store. The store will scan your face connected to your bank account or your digital ID, and then you grab what you want and you leave. You don't have to talk or touch a human, and then everything is automatically deducted from your account. It's so easy. It's so convenient. They're already testing these kind of things out in another area, the entertainment area, which when it comes to sports, for example, the NFL, I think, has rolled out facial recognition at nearly every NFL stadium now. And I don't see any resistance from any football fans who are complaining about it. There's no more physical tickets anymore. It's all digital, and there's facial recognition at all those stadiums. So they're going to sell it to people under the guise of convenience. Safety, of course, is a big one. Tell people you're going to keep them safe, whether that's from the Muslim terrorists or from the cartel leaders or gang members or what have you. And even when those fears have some seed of truth, they will expand it and, of course, exaggerate it to get people to, okay, fine, I'll accept whatever you say as long as I feel safe. So we should very much be on guard and remember what we saw during COVID, because they will use the same tactics: coercion, convenience. And then whenever they can't get that, they will, of course, start to put more pressure on people. And this is part of what I talk about in Liberation 2030, is if we can see where these agendas are going, why not put more of our time, energy into our own lives and try to be as free from those systems as possible?
Right. Something that scares me constantly is that the state could decide, oh, your child is distressed or has a mental illness, and so then, that child now belongs to me. And they can use any kind of data point to do that. I mean, if, you can refuse right now medical treatment, you cannot refuse if the state declares you insane treatment based on that. And so, any kind of data that we give to the state scares me. I always tell my kids, like, no surveys. If you're in a sports club or anything like that, you mark something like, I don't know, have you felt sad this week? It can be as innocuous as that. That's on your file. Those
Sure.
are the kind of things I'm constantly worried about as a parent. The book I mentioned earlier was Layered Money by Nick Bhatia. Have you read that?
I'm not familiar with it, but I'll have to check it out.
Okay. Yeah, I quite liked it. But it does warn about central bank digital currencies and Bitcoin and things like that. And it's a great history of money, if not, I believe he is pro digital currencies. I can't remember now. Anyhow, that was an aside. What was I going to ask you next? You know what? Why don't we take a quick break and then you can lay out for us after the break your vision for how we resist this. Did you know how much e-commerce is built off of Shopify? Well, quite a lot, including the Redacted store. So if you go over to redacted.store, is it redactedstore.com? Sorry. You'll see that purple Shop Pay button. That means that the store that you're on is run on Shopify. That means that the people who run that store can rely on Shopify, from graphic design, handling payments, shipping, fulfillment, all of it. They can do all the back end. So if you'd like to launch your store to the world, let Shopify take care of the details. It's easy. It's easy to make something beautiful that doesn't look like, I don't know, Web 1.0. You don't have to really have an eye for graphic design or a talent. You just implement and they will help you every step of the way. Plus, they have round-the-clock customer support and care. If you get stuck, again, Shopify has advice. They have their award-winning 24/7 customer support. You'd be surprised how much of the web runs on Shopify. So if they can do it, you can too. Check them out at shopify.com/redacted. Sign up for a 1-month trial period today. They have everything you need to grow your business. Again, shopify.com/redacted. I want to tell you about our friends over at Bright Core Nutrition because, hey, have you tried their new kimchi pill? Well, the reason that they invented it is several reasons, but one is to help you fight microplastics, which are in every part of our lives. Scientists now estimate that we consume a credit card's worth of plastic every week through our food, our water, our tea bags even. One study found microplastics in human lungs. No one is safe from exposure. And plastics don't just sit in your body. They cross the gut lining and leach into your blood, disrupt everything. They've been shown to alter gut bacteria. They are also an endocrine disruptor, which means they're messing with your hormones. So again, even if you eat clean or avoid packaged food, you're still exposed. You really can't opt out. But your gut can fight back with Kimchi One from Bright Core Nutrition. It is a potent ally in this toxic world. It is packed with over 900 probiotic strains unique to kimchi and proven to break down BPA, helping you detox from the inside out. It doesn't just support digestion, it helps protect your cells, your brains, one brain. You probably have one brain. Your hormones and your future. Your body was never designed to handle plastics, but your gut was designed to help protect you. You just have to give it the right tools. So right now you can get 25% off with our code redacted at the link below. It's mybrightcore.com/redacted, or you can call. You can call and get even 50% off plus free shipping. The number is there, 888-404-6312. You might get a better deal if you call, but if you'd like, either way, mybrightcore.com/redacted for their great kimchi one. mybrightcore.com/redacted. Well, now that we've sufficiently scared ourselves about what could happen, why don't we lay out your vision of how we resist it and how our future could look if we do sort of band together in this great human spirit of resistance?
Absolutely. So this is where, I've tried to reframe what they talk about. We own nothing and be happy. Welcome to 2030. I have no privacy, all that sort of stuff. And I started calling it Liberation 2030, just to kind of take their language, take their themes and remake them. And this was sort of inspired by in the summer of 2020, when I first heard about this Great Reset announcement, and many of us were learning about Event 201, the Bill Gates table exercise they did simulating a pandemic. I was actually part of an online event at that time that was called Event 202. And it was a really creative idea. A bunch of activists got together and said, okay, well, let's hold our own tabletop exercise and let's imagine how this is all going to play out, of course, from a people-powered perspective. And I really liked that idea of kind of taking things that these people, these technocrats, these psychopaths put out, and then trying to remanufacture them, remake them so that they are more about what we actually want. And I think there's also power in that, in us putting our time and energy, whether you literally sit down and think of, okay, what do I want 2030 to look at, or you draw it out, or you just write it down. I think there is real power in us putting our intention and putting our minds focused on that and not always on what we've just covered here. So
Yeah.
I started to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, a lot of times the reaction to this is to become full-on homesteader. And that can be very overwhelming too, as someone who did, in
Absolutely.
fact, have a big garden. I had bees, I had chickens, and then I couldn't do the show. I can't do my work at the same time. I cannot do it all. I cannot have a full-on homestead and also be the journalist that I want to be. So I would like to envision a future in which I don't have to go back to living like, native peoples.
Sure. No, yeah, let's talk about that. What I was going to say there is that for me, what I started to do is I took that original essay and originally before it became this documentary, it was just an article I wrote for the Last American Vagabond called "Welcome to 2030. I own land. I live amongst like-minded people, and life has never been better." And it was again just kind of twisting their thing
Yeah.
and turning it on its head. But to your point, as far as trying to go off the grid or homestead, which I think is a potential solution. I don't want to sit here and say that's the only solution or that works for everybody because I realize we all
Yeah.
have different life paths. Like I
Right.
do own land. I do have a small farm. I'm not living on it full time at the moment, but we just harvested about 300 avocados from one tree. And that's a nice feeling to have that abundance. But I will
Amazing.
say I couldn't and I did not do it on my own. I mean, I'm not extremely wealthy to go afford to just throw everything into land on my own. I also do have a day job as a journalist like yourself. And so for me, community is really key. And this is one of the things I talk about in Liberation 2030. Whether you're talking about living in the suburbs or living in the city, which I don't think will be long-term safe, but if that's your choice, or going to the land and building a community or building a homestead for your family, to me, it's going to take community. And that might just be you and your family, your extended family, your church, whatever you have. But for me, it involved finding other like-minded people. It's been a 5-year process of finding the right people who are on the same page of our values and principles and who have the same vision. There's a lot of work that goes into that. And it's definitely, as you said, it's a challenging thing to continue writing articles, making documentaries, doing podcasts, and still have time for that. So I don't want to say that that's the only solution. I think by now, everybody who's heard me here on Redacted and my own work knows that I don't think the solutions are going to come through politics. That doesn't mean I don't think we should try to resist on the local level where we can, because at the end of the day, these Agenda 2030 issues, they do roll out. The UN might make some announcements, but it doesn't happen on the federal level. It happens in your own backyard. That's how they start to implement these policies. So if you're going to, try to take the political route, I would recommend focusing on what you can do in the school board, in the town council, in the city council. And I've done that. And I've ran for mayor twice in Houston, where I'm originally from, and got on all the media. And I still find value in that. But ultimately, for me, I do think that even if all this stuff disappeared overnight, even if Agenda 2030 turned out, you know what, Natalie, we're just a bunch of conspiracy theorists, everything's fine, I probably would still go this route because I want to be closer to the earth. I want to be closer to my food supply. I want to live amongst like-minded people who share the same values. I don't see a lot of redeeming value in much of the modern world. And so I'm not necessarily trying to salvage or save or reform what does exist. I also am not a father yet, but I have 6 nieces and nephews, and the concerns you expressed a moment ago, I have very much the same concerns for their future. And I guess I see what I'm trying to do with building my community and what I call exit and build, which is about exiting from these different systems, whether that's big tech, whether that's the banking system. We could go through the whole gamut of them, and trying to focus on building parallel systems. I do that because I think I want to lead by example and try to show my nieces and nephews and anybody else who might be influenced that perhaps there is another way that doesn't have to involve accepting what's coming. Because I do think there should be resistance, but unfortunately, Natalie, I don't see much resistance happening to the facial recognition rolling out the airports. I don't see much resistance happening to, the surveillance measures I mentioned earlier that are happening under ICE or Border Patrol or any other agency. I see a lot of people talking about it on the internet, but I don't see much resistance happening. And I almost kind of wish we were back in COVID times, or at least that same feeling where it was 24/7, kind of cycle, because at least then people were ready to make moves. I saw people moving across the country, across the US, different states, picking up their entire lives, or moving to Mexico, or moving wherever they thought was, better for their families, quitting their jobs, changing their habits, like really actually taking concrete steps. But unfortunately, it seems like since things have kind of calmed down, even though we're facing the same agendas, I don't see that same momentum. So this is why I tend to focus on, okay, if we can't stop what's coming, then how do we survive, and not just survive and scrape by, but actually thrive outside of what they're trying to build? And that's what I'm trying to do with promoting this Liberation 30 idea and this exit and build idea, to really offer an alternative vision.
Right. I mean, I do see certain, for instance, one of my accountants, she lives in a small town in Arizona, and they resisted a new cell tower right in the center of their city because they were researched about what that does to a community. And so it could be as small as that, or, what we just saw with the Canadian ostrich farm, that the government can come and take domain over farms, over agriculture. Now, no one is eating the ostriches, but still, these are the kind of things that will continue to creep. I hope it doesn't have to be that shocking for us to resist, because we see some successful examples and some not successful examples. And so you can get dark about the fact that we would be, taking one step forward and two steps back. But what are some other examples that you can think of? Because I'm not the kind of person who thinks that all big ag is bad. A lot of times these larger farms are broken up into small family ownership. And so you have to defend them whenever you can.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of good, well-meaning farms out there. I also think that if they're still supporting the pesticide industry and the GMO industry, then whether they intend to be or not, they're kind of part of the problem, because that is damaging the environment. That's leading to more. There's studies linking pesticides to autism. There's pesticides linking, studies linking pesticides to all sort of neurodevelopmental problems in children as well. So, I mean, for those who care about the future generations, that's a big problem. But I think that for me, and this is one of the things I talk about in Liberation 2030, I sort of describe this vision of living in community amongst like-minded people. But I also describe how people could focus on becoming independent from the electric grid, which, again, if you're living in the city, it sounds maybe impossible. And in some cases, they've made it illegal, which again to me is like, okay, that should be a reality check. Why would you want to stay there then if you can kind of see the writing on the wall? And I guess that's really what this Liberation 2030 is asking people to do, is to be a little bit forward thinking. Like, what good is it for us to be awake and do nothing about it? Like, okay, we're sitting on a train headed for a crash. We can see it coming down the line, and we just keep talking about it on the internet. We keep complaining it's getting closer, but we're doing nothing to prepare, nothing to get off the train, nothing to try to create an alternative path. That's where I think the energy and the focus should be, because unfortunately, and this is just my perspective, but I don't think that the lives that many people have built for themselves are going to be possible if you really care about privacy and liberty in the long term. And I know that's hard for people who have built their entire lives, and you've got student loan debt, you've got 401ks, you've got a mortgage, you've got these things. I'm not saying to abandon those things or anything, but I am saying let's start being realistic about where that's going to lead. If you're stuck in those systems, and we know those systems are going to CBDCs and stable coins and digital IDs, is there a path for you that doesn't involve those things? Is there any way for you to try to at least start to take yourself out of those systems? Because of course, this isn't going to happen overnight. I've been on this path for a couple of decades now. I haven't used banks since 2008. I don't talk to certain government agencies. I don't own a phone. I try to be as unplugged as possible. It comes with lots of challenges, as you can imagine. But for me, I'm kind of out on the extreme, trying to say, hey guys, maybe there's another path. Not because I expect people to take the same path as me, but to say, well, what can you do for yourself? If we see what's going on, then we should at least be thinking about it. Because again, I've been focused on trying to get people to think about not just being awake, but being activated, like actively working on your own liberation and protecting your family. Because again, I don't know that there's much of a resistance movement happening. Maybe at the last moment, humanity will rise. And when it's just about to be the time where they put us in the FEMA camps, people finally wake up. But I'd rather be in a position that as things progress in this unsafe, unhealthy direction, that I'm in a position where I'm set and I can actually offer help to other people, as opposed to being in a position of scarcity and saying, sorry, screw you. I can't help you because I got to worry about me. And I think that's where most people are going to be who end up unprepared. And so, I want to the invitation is not to say everybody needs to go off grid and get off, own a homestead. I think there's value to that, but also maybe you can stop using Google. Maybe you can use alternative search engines. Maybe you can stop using Gmail. I have actually a challenge if people are interested. It's called the Exit and Build Challenge. It's available for free on my website at theconsciousresistance.com/EXB For exit and build, it's just those 3 letters, EXB. And I go through food, I go through technology, through finances, and these different areas that I think are of value, and sort of ask the question, like, what is the problem if I stay plugged into the system? Where is this headed? And then what are some alternative solutions? And then it's up, of course, to the person to do anything about it. But I think that that was what matters most to me right now, is trying to use the journalism to bring people to a place of, maybe things aren't what I've been told. And then what do we do? What comes after that? Because again, I think we need to be more than just awake. We need to be actively trying to work for the coming generations. And part of that is because of my native heritage. We have been taught, to think of the 7 generations and beyond. So I'm definitely very much focused on like the future, not just what I'm seeing right now in front of me. And I know that 100% the people of the future, your children's children and their children and your great great grandchildren that you will never meet, are 100% depending on those of us who are living right now. The world that they're going to be born into is 100% going to be based on what we do or do not do. And so I try to give a lot of weight to the actions that I take now, and encourage more people to just think, we don't have to accept their Agenda 2030 as reality. Although, like I said, I don't see a lot of resistance. We don't have to accept that as reality. But if we don't accept that, then what is it that we want out of 2030 and beyond?
Yeah. Let's take one more break. I want to talk about the online discourse when we get back, because I think that that's a useful thing to do when we're talking about change. So let's put a pin in that, and we'll be right back. Is your money working for you? Well, investing in real estate has never been easier, and people who own tangible assets like real estate can say that their money is working for them, because savings accounts and CDs, they offer low returns, barely keep up with inflation. The stock market, well, that's volatile, unpredictable. One day you're up, one day you're down. If you're tired of watching your hard-earned money sit idle or ride the market roller coaster, then it's time for a better solution. Now you can invest in real estate short notes with as little as just $500 with annualized returns of up to 9%. Yes, you heard me right. Real estate has long been proven as a way to build wealth, but for most, the barriers of buying real estate are just too high. They don't have the time, they don't have the money to buy a whole property. Well, that's why you can invest in these funds. A short note means that you are collectively funding commercial and residential real estate projects, but you don't own the whole thing, so you don't have to manage, you don't have to clean the toilets or fix the windows or the garbage, none of that. There's no property management, no market swings, just steady, predictable income with annualized return rates of up to 9%. So this is how easy it is to get started. Head on over to redacted.inc/invest. Fund your digital wallet with $500 or more. Select a short note, 6, 12, or 24 months, and sit back and earn monthly income through your returns. So again, join the thousands of investors who are doing just this, and you can get a $50 bonus in your digital wallet. So again, you can start with as little as $500. Go to redacted.inc/invest. Stop letting your money sit idle. Invest smarter, earn more, and build with Connect Invest. The US dollar as the global currency is a fad that is on its way out, and the cryptocurrency trend is no longer emerging, it's here. This latest move cements reality in a big way. Trump's media just inked a massive $6.4 billion deal with Yorkville Acquisition Corp. and Crypto.com, the crypto platform trusted by millions of users worldwide. They're teaming up to scoop up $6.4 billion in this powerhouse token, CRO, that fuels fast, low-fee DeFi, staking rewards, and real-world perks like cash back on your spends to establish America's first CRO treasury, Trump Media Group's CRO strategy. So check it out for yourself. When this is done, this new company will be the biggest publicly traded CRO holder out there. If you want in on the action, head on over to Crypto.com today. Let's make crypto great again. For more information on the proposed business combination, check out Yorkville Acquisition Corp's public filing. Again, check it out for yourself. Go to Crypto.com. It's a great way. Again, crypto is a tangible asset. You cannot inflate it. You cannot bet on it. You cannot hedge against it. You cannot run up debt. So again, check it out for yourself, Crypto.com. As we continue to play out your vision, Derek, I want to talk about some of the online discourse, because a lot of times I see that people get really excited about what I might call a punk rock movement, for lack of a better term. Like, this is the establishment, this person will disrupt it. And I think Trump meant that to a lot of people. And I saw your discourse online saying he doesn't mean that. You need to open your eyes and look at that. And I appreciate that, but I like to approach political discourse. This is not easy for me, but I try to approach discourse with the underlying assumption that everyone is doing their best, and that even if you are misled, usually you're misled for the right intentions. So for instance, all these young girls thinking that abortion means freedom. I feel very sorry for people whose algorithm continues to tell them that, because abortion is a very painful and bad, like, outcome for your body. It's not something you should aspire to as a freedom, but it is something that many people need access to for some reasons, right? And so it's not as simple as what your algorithm tells you, but a lot of people are going online to scream about the need for abortions because they see it, because they are well-intended, if not misguided. So a lot of times this discord can turn acrid because you and I maybe can see you're missing the big point here. You're missing it, right? And so I can't engage with you, or I think less of you, or something like. So how can we have an online discourse where we're telling people you're missing it, but also be nice? You know what I'm saying?
That's a struggle, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
This is one that I battled, like probably most of us who have a platform on a daily basis, especially if for some reason it seems to be the worst on Twitter. I will say that, at least in my perspective.
Right.
Yeah. And it's something that I do battle with as well, because my work as a journalist and as an activist is very much rooted in this belief. Like my website, The Conscious Resistance, to me, that is like, I believe that there's going to be an evolution of consciousness. I believe it is happening right now. It's ongoing. And at the same time, I look around and I'm like, oh my God, we're so far from anything that I would consider to be headed in the right direction. And it's hard not to be overwhelmed by that. It's hard to kind of root yourself in that sort of heart space and stay at like Christ or like Buddha and just talk to people like calmly, like when you sometimes feel enraged, especially about the issue you just mentioned there, which obviously is something that is very, very difficult to kind of see people promoting. And I have those same challenges, whether it's about Trump or any other issue. And I think I sometimes also take it personally, a little more personally, whether I intend to or not, when it's people that I know are real human beings, because we all know there's bots out there, right? And sometimes people will be like, you're arguing with a bot, and maybe it is a bot. And I'm like, okay, let me step away. I need to go touch grass, as they say. But other times I'm like, no, I know this is a person, a real life person. I've met them, I've talked to them. And unfortunately they've fallen, for this, whatever the particular issue is, they've fallen for this psyop. And it's hard not to want to kind of grab them and shake them and like, wake up. But I also think that if any of us who've gone through that path, like when you first start waking up, there tends to be this kind of reaction where you think you got to shout it at everybody you meet and just drive everybody crazy. And you're like, oh my God, why can't you guys see what I'm seeing? And then after a while, you kind of realize like, okay, that's not the most effective approach. I'm pushing people away. Let me find a different path. And it's, that is, I think, the correct mode, is like, try to reach people where they're at, try to come with compassion, come with empathy. But it is difficult to stay in that space all the time. And again, like I said, I struggle with that too. There's some days where I fall into, I've seen you out there in the battlefield of Twitter, Natalie, and it's hard to sometimes keep that, that strength and that compassion. But ultimately, like on a higher level, I know that for me, as just a human being to other human beings, that I care about the fate of humanity. That's why I get so stressed or get so frustrated, or I think any of us can, is because we care about these outcomes. It's not, like, oh, look at me, I'm right, and I need to tell everybody how I have all the answers or anything. That's definitely not where I try to come from. But it is this genuine place of like, I care about the future of humanity and where things are going. And there's days when I'm just like, oh my God, I'm very stressed to see where things are at. Particularly recently, I think there's a lot of young men. I have several nephews who are 15 and under, and I see some of the things that they're coming across on TikTok and elsewhere, and questions that they ask, and just things that they're into, this sort of internet culture that they're very much, aware of. And I worry about the influences that they're finding. I worry about, all that sort of thing. And so for me, I try to stay in that centered place, try to be a better example, not just for my own family, but for anybody else. And I think it's part of our human struggle, right? To feel like we want to empower and help the planet. But ultimately, I think for me, it comes back to I have to help myself, right? And this is why I was saying
Right.
earlier, I tend to just try to lead by example, because in my experience of doing this journalism and activism for the last 16 years and being on the internet and trying to motivate, inspire people from marches and rallies and protests and podcasts and interviews and documentaries and books and films and events, the thing that seems to work the best is leading by example. That's how people learn. Like if they can see you, you're not just talking about something and preaching it on the internet, but oh, you're actually living the things you value. Everything that I said before and that I share in Liberation 2030 about exit and build, these are things that I'm doing and trying myself. I don't have them perfected, but these are efforts that I'm making. So I find that that is, I try to bring myself back to that place. It's like, okay, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling stressed out. People feel lost from my perspective, or they're buying into this psyop or this psyop. Let me just kind of step away and just focus on what can I do to be productive today that's actually going to help humanity and
Yeah.
empower them, instead of spending the day arguing with people on Twitter.
Sometimes that feels good though. I get it.
There is a little
Sometimes
bit
you
of
want to do that.
there's a little bit of a release valve from that, right?
There is. But again, I saw a lot of this blind faith in the Trump administration as a disruptor. And I see people who are dug into that, and I see people who are willing to be disappointed that it's not. And so I feel, even though, like you and I, we haven't read the same books, so we're not looking at something from the same perspective. I can't expect you to know what I know or feel what I feel or see a grander picture the way I do. And so I don't know exactly how I feel about the Groyper movement, but I like the willingness to challenge, certain establishment. And I don't know if it's organic or not. I have no idea.
I have questions about that too.
Yeah. And so I have no idea. But what it means to my son's generation is to push back against the establishment and to break down existing duality, Democrat and Republican. And so I like it. I want to keep asking those questions and let that unfold until something. So I guess there's this reaction from people who feel like us, like no conspiracy is too far. We're going to ask everything. To say, well, anything that gets too big is, that's got to be a psyop. And so we're like, well, let's see how this goes. But if we see some signs of a psyop, we're going to dig our heels in. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes the discourse has to keep going, but at the same time, we know that it's filtered through certain narratives. Yeah. So, how do we know? We really can't trust anything. Except you and me, I guess, because we're asking questions.
Yeah, trust us. To that point, one of the things that I will say, because whether not to focus on the Groyper thing, but just for a moment, as that is very relevant right now, Nick Fuentes, I think everybody needs to remember that if and when the establishment wants to silence somebody or ignore them, they don't put them on the front page of the New York Times. The algorithm is also a very effective tool for shadow banning people. I mean, I remember back in 2014,
well, I mean,
us independent media, we were warning people.
Let me just push back at that for a second, because the New York Times has taken many swipes at my family, and they are not our friends, and they absolutely don't want us to. So.
But they didn't give you a profile like Nick Fuentes with a nice, glamour photo on the front page,
well,
in a full profile of him.
Yes. In fact, and I don't want to draw attention to it, but we have had firsthand experience several times with articles that they've written about my family that were just as equally shitty, but maybe you could see as I don't want to.
I hear your point. I hear your point. Well, yeah. To the other point, I was making about the algorithm. They are demons,
and I think that they should, like rotten hell, that business model. But I don't. Anyway. But yeah, I don't think that is.
Well, I'm not saying that alone being reported in the New York Times, but what I was getting at is also you have the algorithm, and we all know that the algorithm can boost or derank things. I mean, not just on Twitter, but this is. I mean, back in 2014, I was writing for several independent media outlets, and we were telling people we didn't even have the word yet, shadow ban. We were just saying they're messing with our numbers. We could see on 1 week we'd be hitting 100 million, people a day. We were kicking CNN's ass, and then all of a sudden, boom, just a complete drop. Yeah. And everybody thought that was a conspiracy. Now we all know that these things exist, that the platforms can elevate, they can downrank things. And what I was getting to is that I think that the algorithm and maybe humanity itself favors drama, favors clickbait, favors rage bait. So I can put out a podcast or a documentary that's solutions based, like Liberation 2030, and we'll see how much attention it gets compared to here's the latest drama about Jeffrey Epstein. People are drawn to those things, and I think that is a huge problem, is that people seem to just want to focus and debate the conspiracies. Like anytime I meet somebody in real life who knows my work, the first thing that they want to do is ask me about their favorite conspiracy and dissect it and just, have a fun conversation. And I get that. I understand that that's something we don't get to do necessarily in our daily lives, especially if you aren't around community where you can do that. But I think that there's a lot of people, and maybe it's just part of our brain that is just drawn to that. We want to look at the car wreck. We want to focus on the drama, the salacious details. Oh, take care of yourself, build something, empower yourself. Yeah, that sounds like too much work. And the algorithm, I think, is a big part of that. There might be some human nature, but the algorithm absolutely does not favor conversations that are constructive, that are empowering, that are giving people solutions. And the independent media and alternative media, I think in many ways we kind of play into that. And obviously we have things to report
Yeah.
on. There's things that are not the happy stories of the day. But I do think that that plays a role as well, that in many ways we are kind of centering our focus and bringing the focus towards only the negative and not thinking about, again, the empowering side of what's going on in our world, which there is a lot of empowering things happening.
Like what, for instance?
Well, I mean, I don't want to promote my own stuff too much, but I think it is a big part of it. I mean, I host an event every January in Mexico called the People's Reset, which is very much the focus of this Liberation 2030 idea. We, like I said with Event 202, we took that same idea. They want to call it the Great Reset. The event was originally called the Greater Reset, and then we rebranded a couple years ago as the People's Reset. We meet every year at the same time as Davos for 5 days in January. But instead of talking about technocratic top-down solutions, we talk about bottom-up solutions. We have a whole day dedicated to mental, physical, spiritual health. We have a whole day dedicated to permaculture and growing food, homeschooling, unschooling, privacy-based decentralized technology, building communities, just the whole gamut of these sorts of things. We have music, we have workshops. We try to make it an empowering, fun thing. And again, I'm not just saying this because I organize the event, but the kind of comments and the things that I hear from people are, this changed my life. This changed my whole paradigm. I started growing food after this. I'm unschooling my kids now. I'm homeschooling my kids. People are coming to the event. They're getting activated. We call it an activation, not a conference or a festival. And to me, that's just one small way that I can try to do my part. We get like 500 people that might come from around the world, but there's 10,000 plus people who watch, typically from about 25 countries. And so people, whether they're in person or watching from home, they're actually getting some practical ideas that they can implement in their lives. It doesn't mean they need to go live on the land if that's not their path, but maybe they learn about a new technological tool that's going to give them some more privacy or give them some, a little bit more freedom in their hands. And to me, those are the kind of things that my focus, although I will always be a journalist, is going to increasingly go in that direction, because I see the value. I see the difference between when I tell people about how bad the world is, which is important and has a place, and then when people come to the People's Reset and then they're in tears because they feel like they're finally around people they can, openly discuss ideas and they're not being judged, and then they go home motivated and excited to actually do something. Like, those are the kind of things that I think we need more of. And it's not that I'm the only person doing that. I've since met a lot of other movements in different parts of the world that are equally focused on, hey, what can we do ourselves? And I hope that there will be more of that coming in from the independent. Obviously as media, we play a role. That's one role. We're not necessarily all intended to be activists. This is actually a criticism I sometimes see that I think is not legit. People will say, okay, well, Whitney Webb or Redacted or Derek, you guys tell us all the problems, but what are we going to do about it? Well, that's not really a journalist's
Yeah.
job. That's not the
Right.
job of a journalist to tell you what to do. But for me as an
Or
activist,
to
I
have
do
a
want to try to
solution.
share that.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't need to report on something. You don't need to have a solution just to report on something. So I do think people haven't,
Yeah.
they don't understand that that's not the role of journalists. But I also think we can, like you're giving me an opportunity right now, to try to shine a light on something that maybe will empower other people, right? How can we as journalists still try to highlight people or, other solutions that we might think could be helpful for people? I think that's a role that journalists could play. And ultimately, it's up to people to take care of their own lives, right? Because anything you and I say, it can go in one ear and out the other. And if we could give somebody the 100% foolproof solution that'll change your life, but if they don't take it into their hands and take charge of their own life, it doesn't matter, right? So ultimately, people have to step up and say, you know what, I value my life enough, I value my family's lives enough, and I value the coming generations, that I'm going to make some effort to try to help myself.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this conversation. I think it's been fun to sort of just talk it through because we live it on so many different levels. We have to live it at the practical level with, utilities and driver's licenses and all of that. We have to live it at the online discourse. And then we have to live it in some kind of solution space or at least faith, no matter how that shows up. Because that's the world we're living in right now. That's what we got to do. So I always like talking to you. It's absolutely my pleasure. So where can we find Liberation 2030?
Yes, thank you so much, Natalie. I've appreciated the conversation as well. Everybody can find Liberation 2030 at theconsciousresistance.com. It'll be on the homepage. You'll see it right there. There's also a tab for my documentaries if you want to see any of my other documentaries I've done, including the final episode of The Pyramid of Power is almost out, and I can't wait to share that with you, Natalie, and everybody at Redacted. And if anybody is interested in the People's Reset, it happens January 28th to February 1st in Morelia, Mexico for 5 days. The website for that is thepeoplesreset.org.
Love it. Okay. Always good to see you. We'll see you again soon, Derek.
Thank you.
I honestly couldn't do this job every day if it wasn't for ExpressVPN. That's not an exaggeration. Every single day that I need to check websites, read reports, access sources from around the world, I need to use ExpressVPN because the truth is many of those websites are censored. This just happened to me, in fact. I was in the UK, I was in Scotland, and I had to jump on a couple of different websites. I couldn't. They were blocked. And without ExpressVPN, I would have been completely cut off, unable to access different websites while I was there. So here's how it works. ExpressVPN lets you change your online location instead of being stuck with the version of the internet that your government wants you to see. You can connect through one of ExpressVPN's secure servers in another country. That means if a site is blocked in the UK, I can instantly connect through a US server and bam, it's wide open. Same thing if you want to access more shows or streaming services, you're no longer limited to what's available in your country. It's not just about censorship. ExpressVPN also encrypts your internet connection so your personal data is secure. Not hackers, not corporations, not even internet providers can track what you're doing. It's about privacy, it's about online freedom. So don't wait until you run into some kind of a wall like I have. Take back control of your internet today. Find out how you can get up to 4 months free by clicking the link in the description box below, or just scanning the QR code that's right on your screen, or go to expressvpn.com/redacted. Again, find out how you can get up to 4 months free by clicking that link in the description or scanning that QR code on the screen. Visit expressvpn.com/redacted.